Okay, everyone. Hi. Lucy's at stuff.
What are we doing right now?
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi. I'm Raleigh Voss. I am a broker with Sotheby's, and we are so lucky tonight to have these title experts here with us. And we also are so grateful to have the ability to host at the W Residences. There is still inventory available at the W Residences, so we'll hear from Jay in just a bit about what's available, the amenities, and what you can tell your clients about. This is obviously one of the best addresses you can have in Aspen, and the views are incredible. You have access as an owner to the private roof deck. So if you haven't had a chance to run over there and see the views from the private roof deck, please do. And then that connects to the public pool and bar and all of that up on the top. So this evening we have Mark Lewis moderating. And he's going to introduce our panelists in just a bit. But we just felt like it was high time for us to get together and talk about something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in each one of our transactions. And we've had the privilege for the last 7 events to talk about development, talk about all sorts of different things. But this is something that I think all of us, especially as newer realtors, struggle with. I know 5 years ago when I started, I was getting some title emails and I was like, I hope somebody else catches what's going on here. But now, you know, that once we get a little bit more seasoned and everything starts to make sense, it's interesting to go through different transactions and see all the different title scenarios that come up. So I think tonight's going to be really beneficial for all of us. And so thank you so much for coming. And if you want tours of any of the residences, et cetera, just let us know. And Jay Israel will kick us off with a little bit about the development.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me without that? I hope. Okay. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're happy to host you here. For any of you that have not been to the W or are unfamiliar with it, it's a fractional property. We have a total of 10 residences, 5 3-bedrooms, 5 2-bedrooms. We had a total of 6 3-bedrooms initially, but we had one of our buyers bought 10 shares. We broke it out of the program and it's theirs independently. There is still that opportunity to do that in a 2-bedroom as well. If any of you have an owner that wants to buy a ski in, ski out 2-bedroom condo that looks just like the one we're in, let me know. That window is closing. We are down to our last 5 shares in the 3-bedrooms. We'll probably be done by the end of April, we suspect. That has been our most success and our most desired product. Obviously, as we know, most people want more, bigger. So in our 2-bedrooms, we still have about 50% of our shares left to sell. Current pricing is $590,000. You get 5 weeks. And as I said, the residences look identical. So it's just like the one that you're in this evening. Same kitchen, same living room. Might be a little different layout, not have a vaulted ceiling depending on where it is in the building. But for all intents and purposes, for about $600,000, your clients can get this with steps to the snow, steps to town. We believe it to be unparalleled in Aspen. So again, thank you guys for coming. If you have any question, we always have a broker on site. I'm with Sotheby's. This is a Sotheby's listing. So please reach out to anybody in any of the Sotheby's offices, or please feel free to just stop over to the property. And somebody's here pretty much at some point 7 days a week. So thank you for coming tonight. If you do have any questions, I'll be around. I can answer them for you this evening. Otherwise, please just come on your own with clients. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Raleigh. Where'd you disappear to? Oh, there you are. Okay. YPN must have been pretty hard up to have to ask me up here. But it's a privilege to be here sitting with this panel. But I'm very proud to have been asked to participate with this evening's event, and I'll promise I'll keep this one G-rated. Not like Jackson Horn's Realtor of the Year speech. Sorry, Jay. I also promise not to bring up any Jada Pinkett Smith G.I. Jane 2 jokes a la Chris Rock. I am not in the mood to get Will Smithed up here, if you know what I mean.
Are you love getting
I'll give you about 2 hours to cut that one out. It's good to see everybody here this evening. It's a good thing that the weather is not like the last weekend, the end of last week. I think Title Company of the Rockies lucked out for two reasons. One, if the weather was like it was last weekend, the bar tab would have been a whole hell of a lot. As well as if I wasn't asked to be a moderator, I would have been in the crowd running up the bar tabs. Anyways, it's a privilege to be in the company of our distinguished panel of guests tonight for our discussion on title matters. Joining us tonight is Avery Nelson, attorney at Wood, Pierce & Nelson. Ben Genshaft, attorney with Was, Campbell, Rivera, Johnson, and Velasquez. Please repeat that 3 times. And from Title Company of the Rockies, we are joined by Priscilla Pearl Cooper, who is our regional manager. Everybody knows Priscilla here. And Bob Howe, president of Title Company of the Rockies. Thank you all again for being here. So again, I'd like to thank TCOR for the great foods, the eats, and the cocktails tonight, and the refreshments. Thank you. Lastly, before we get started with the information at hand, I want to give recognition to our local YPN network chapter. As was documented on the invitation that was sent to us, the Young Professionals Network was started by Realtor magazine as an outgrowth of its popular 30 Under 30 feature. The magazine wanted to encourage with young readers at a deeper level. Within a year, there was a YPN National Advisory Board, and state and local associations were starting their own networks. Aspen is one of those associations to create their own network. 3 of the founding local young professionals who are here tonight were part of the original launch group, and they continue to carry this local network chapter forward. But not only have they carried it, they have created a local YPN network that is cutting edge and is well recognized across the country. This is the 8th local event that these 3 brilliant ladies have organized, the last being held last fall at Aspen Street Lodge. Unfortunately, the events were put on ice for a brief hiatus caused by COVID. We are now back. And in addition to creating and organizing these worthwhile events, the creation of the Aspen Cookbook, which they spearheaded, has sold over 4,000 copies to date and has had 2 reprints. Of course, the proceeds of the Aspen Cookbook benefited the local restaurant workers who struggled during the pandemic. So thank you, thank you. I also want to offer a big, huge, heartfelt thank you to Raleigh Voss, Alexander George, and Kiki Pasich for doing all that you do to contribute towards our local YPN network chapter as well as outside of our boundaries. It has been shared with me that these ladies are YPN trendsetters for the entire nation as they are on the cutting edge all across the country. Thank you all for doing what you do. And of course, the machine is only good as the sum of its parts. Thank you to the Aspen Board of Realtors CEO, Maria Cook, and staff, Lacey Snyder and Alicia Sands, for your assistance and service to us, as well as helping to put these events together for us. So thank you. Now that we got all that out of the way, we'll get to the questions for the panel. While Priscilla and Bob do not charge by the hour, Avery and Ben do. Just kidding. They're not charging us tonight, I don't think, are you? I better be quick. Okay, so a lot of these questions are because they're things in the contract that we as brokers need to explain to our clients. That's kind of where the roots of where these questions are coming from. Some of you already know these. Some of you remember from your licensing courses 50 years ago, probably not. But as licensed real estate brokers, whether working in an agency capacity or as a transaction broker or treating the prospect as a customer, we all have two things in common, and that is acting as a transaction facilitator and or manager, as well as knowing how to draft and follow the dates and deadlines and contingencies of a contract. One of the biggest downfalls that we see is a broker drafting a contract and submitting it to a title company, but that is where many brokers drop off, thinking that they have satisfied their job when it comes to paragraph 8 of the contract. Remember, the title company acts as an independent third party to the contract, as well as the contract scrivener to perform the services. It is our responsibility as brokers and real estate professionals to know and be able to manage the entire process on behalf of our client once the order has been submitted to the title company, and to assist the client in what is expected of them according to the commitment. However, while we need to know how to explain what is contained in a title commitment and the 3 sections included in the title commitment, Schedule A, which includes the parties and the legal description. Schedule B1 outlines the requirements to close the transaction and transfer of title, and Schedule B2 lists the exceptions to title or all recorded documents that benefit or burden the property. It is not our job nor our expertise to interpret the commitment, unless, of course, you're a licensed attorney. This is where a real estate lawyer has earned their stripes. This is where they have been schooled and trained. When it comes to title, it behooves us to always recommend to our clients to get an attorney involved. A title company does not practice law. However, they are selling a very important product that carries with it legal consequences. Some clients seem to push back on the additional expense of hiring an attorney. You need to figure out how to put it in your quiver as to how it will benefit them to have an attorney play a safeguard for them and perform a detailed review on every title commitment, on everything a title commitment contains and how it can affect the client. So, with no further ado, on to the questions.
That was pretty good. I think we're good.
Michael, thank you very much. Come here, Priscilla. Let me slap the shit out. So this question is for Title Company of the Rockies. And Bob and Priscilla, you guys can figure out how you want to answer it together. But while many of us understand the process of submitting a contract to a title company and requesting title insurance, few understand what is behind the curtain of a title company, the local title office being the curtain. I would bet that many in this room don't know what ALTA, A-L-T-A, is an acronym for, or even though we see it on every title commitment. Additionally, who actually provides or underwrites the actual insurance policy? Bob or Priscilla?
ALTA, American Land Title Association. Okay. Colorado, it's Land Title Association of Colorado. We have state chapters, and that's the national chapter. The title commitment itself, when you see the bottom left, when it talks about ALTA in this form and that form, those forms are actually copyrighted by the American Land Title Association. So we have to subscribe as a title agent to be able to use those forms. The terms, the language, the conditions of those forms are reviewed through committees on a national level, and they are occasionally modified. In fact, there's going to be a new modification coming out here over the next year that'll start rolling out from the 1996 version of the standard title commitment. As far as underwriters go, in Colorado, we're kind of an agent-based state, so most of the title commitments in Colorado are done by independent agents like our company. We represent 6 different underwriters. And, you know, depending on the deal, what's the best fit, price. Some underwriters are a little more risk adverse on certain issues than others, and so we try to place that with a solution. So it's the title insurance underwriter that really stands behind the commitment, which is a binder to insure. So if there is a problem, if a claim does come about, it's going to be submitted to that title insurance underwriter, and they're going to determine if there is coverage and then what the issues are.
Cool.
Is that good?
So I need to add anything?
No, I don't think so.
All right, the next question is for Avery or Ben. You guys can arm wrestle. In selecting a title insurance company as addressed in contract paragraph 8.1.1, it provides the choice of choosing to furnish a current commitment for an owner's title insurance policy or an abstract of title certified to a current date. Since brokers need to be able to explain to their clients, if their clients asks, what the difference is between the two, can you briefly remind us what an abstract is and why we don't use them in our area? Also, where would one see an abstract of title being used, still being used?
Sure. Hello. It's funny, I'm going to punt a little on this question because the practical answer is you would just never get an abstract for where we are. Anecdotally, the only time in my practice that I've ever seen an abstract, or what is also, you can get a title opinion from an attorney who's willing to give one, is when I was working with a client who was developing workforce housing in North Dakota. And that was because they were keeping paper files for years and years. Not everything that was even attached to these tracts of land had been formally recorded. So here, where we are, and I would think in most of Colorado, although maybe Bob or Priscilla know otherwise, there might be some counties and rural areas where this wouldn't be the case, but we have really good record keeping. Properties have transferred for the most part, over the years a number of times. Most of what we are dealing with is probably in platted subdivisions. And so we are able to do the research and come up with a list of specific, we can see what the chain of title is and have a level of confidence where you're going to get a title commitment that's insurable. Abstracts of title, you typically wouldn't even get title insurance with. And so you at that point would really just be getting your client comfortable, or the attorney would be, with, their the title to the property and not getting a title policy. So I don't even know if that really answers the question about what an abstract is. It's a summary of the chain of title and whatever documents you can find. But practically speaking, it would never be something that was selected in our standard form contract.
I don't have much to add to that. First of all, thank you so much for having us. Some of you guys I know, some of you I don't, so feel free to introduce yourself if we've not met. Yeah, I totally agree with Avery. It's a wonderful question in theory, but the bottom line is we use title insurance. We get these, and Bob can speak to this because they have these title plants that come up with the recorded documents that affect title to the property, and we can rely on those things. And in my 20 years of practicing, I have come across maybe 2 or 3 abstracts of title, and it's basically just a summary that it's not the vehicle, the tool that the title insurance companies use. So I think the quick answer to your client would be, hey, it's just a summary of how the property traded over time, but we rely on recorded documents, and that's why we get a title commitment.
Yeah. Pre-title companies.
Yeah, I think what Avery said, there's probably some places where abstracts are still used, maybe some states, maybe some counties, I don't know, but I know which ones. Okay.
So if ever a question, call Bob.
And there's not.
If you get a client that really wants a title abstract, call Bob.
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick. I actually grew up in a state. I learned the business in Minnesota, and back in the day, whenever you bought and sold a property, you would update the abstract. So you would have this pile of paper. I owned a house that was built in 1905 at one time, and you'd have this pile of paper. Every time somebody bought and sold, they'd add on to it, add on to it, add on to it. That's an abstract. We used to be abstract companies. Colorado is a title commitment state now, right? So it really is just records supporting the property, and it's not an insurance product. So if you want to know, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Florida still require abstracts.
Bob, that's interesting you say that because I'm now reminded my mother-in-law who lives in Minnesota recently sent me some property documents because she had some questions about her land, and now that I'm thinking about it, it is her abstract of title, the original one. So
cool.
I told her it was pretty much worthless, and now we can get a commitment. We'd get a commitment if we did anything.
Minnesota's a little slow. Not those of us from Minnesota. I actually, just real quick, I sold my parents' house after they both passed away. I went back to Minnesota. After learning contracts in Colorado, went back to Minnesota. It was like a 1.5-page contract. And back then, we were probably at 12 pages, which is a lot more now, but 1.5 pages. And I was saying to the broker, the listing broker, well, what happens if this happens? And what do you do if this happens? And it's like,
Well, no, it's a good point. Just so you guys know, you probably already know this, but Colorado is like way advanced in terms of it's a really good contract. That's why some clients will say, can you just do a quick, we don't need that whole thing. I'm saying you want it. Even if you're not going to use many of those provisions. And I think the title stuff follows with that. It's a better system than the old abstracts and indexes that attorneys used to do. So,
Well, and back in the day, I've done abstracts for the mining claims around here.
I was going to say mining claims.
That was my main thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yikes.
any questions on that one? Well, I think we'll just leave it.
When was the first title company?
Well, let's see, Aspen Title, I think.
Abstracts before title company
Here or just anywhere?
in the United States.
Believe original abstract companies around 1880s. And as you moved into the 40s, into the 50s, that's when title insurance really became prevalent. If you go back across the country, there's still a few states in the East Coast where lawyers are still involved. And they're required either on the closing side, the title side, but as you head to the Midwest, and then get to the Western U.S., it's the business of title insurance.
So abstracts were used by attorneys before title companies.
Correct. And usually then what happened is abstract companies evolved out of that to do the searches. And oftentimes then you'd get an attorney's title opinion if you wanted some sort of assurance, right? And that was usually as good as their errors and omissions insurance.
yeah, the attorney would compile a grantor index search, and they would link that up as best they can. And
What if something wasn't recorded?
yeah, right. Enter title insurance. That's really why it evolved, and it's a much easier process now, and much safer for the buyer.
Bottom line is use title insurance. Don't use the abstract. The whole thing was to bring that up was we need to know what's in the contract and how to explain it to our client when they ask, well, what is this? All right. All right, let's move on. Contract paragraph 8.1.3. This is, let's say, title company of the Rockies, Bob or Priscilla. The paragraph discusses owner's extended coverage, or OEC. The paragraph requires the broker's participation when completing the contract and choosing to check between 4 different boxes. Can you briefly discuss why these are exceptions to a title commitment, not already built into it, and why there's an extra charge to delete them, albeit the charge to delete them is relatively small compared to the title cost itself or the policy?
Go ahead, you got it.
So we've got those built into the contract or into the commitment because there are certain things that we have to obtain from the seller, say a survey affidavit or a mechanic's lien protection for us to be able to remove those. If we don't get those forms signed, then we can't give that protection. And it does protect against things that are unrecorded. So it's worth $75 all day long if there's a mechanic lien out there that we don't know because it wasn't recorded, but then all of a sudden, a day before or a day after our plant date is that we try and date down, it's been recorded. That covers your client.
But for you brokers, when you're, in certain situations, you want to think about it. Like if you've got a client that is in the middle of construction, be careful when you check that OEC box and when you make representations that there's going to be mechanics lien coverage. And then the title company says, well, wait a second, you're not done with construction. We can't issue you mechanics lien coverage. Now, thankfully, title companies will usually work with you to some degree, but sometimes the underwriter just won't do it if the contractor, for example, doesn't have good records of who they've paid and all that. So it's not something to just gloss over. There is some context there, and I would say you got to be a little careful with it.
Here's my little spiel. We're not a party to the contract. So you check OEC, there's a lot of folks that go, well, you need to give us OEC. Well, we need to know what's going on with the property. And as Ben mentioned, if we find out that a kitchen got remodeled and just got done last week, if we find out that the house was under construction for the last year and a half, that doesn't mean that we're going to eliminate necessarily, say, exception 4. It's usually the first 4 or 5 exceptions, which are regional exceptions. Okay, they change around the country. Those can be eliminated usually for a standard plat block lot with a few affidavits. But if you're buying a ranch, we're going to want to see a survey. You know, as Ben mentioned, if it's in the statutory period of mechanics lien exposure, we're going to want to see lien waivers, or maybe we come up with some other solutions depending on what's going on. But OEC does provide extended coverage, which means it's extra coverage. But that just doesn't always mean the title company is going to give it. There's certain business rules and underwriting standards that need to be addressed based on the history of the property.
Yeah, and just to add to that, mechanics lien coverage is really, really critical if you have a buyer who's buying new construction or pre-construction. Mid-construction doesn't happen as much, but it does happen. Mid-construction is probably the most complicated to get lien coverage because you're talking about you've got to get to a point in time where you're comfortable insuring.
Oh, I love this phone call.
Yeah. So I would say to Ben's comment that the standard foreign contract is really great in Colorado and it works in 90% of deals. But if you have a deal where you know that it's a spec development or your client's going to buy a vacant piece of property that already has the plans and is coming with the development team and you're not going to close until it's completed, you need to build those construction elements into the contract, and that really requires some legal drafting that is important. And that would also address this OEC in a little bit more detail.
Great. Thank you, guys. All right, Avery or Ben, could you explain the various types of commonly used deeds in our area, and what advice would you give to brokers when completing the transfer of title contract paragraph 13? Which type of deed is the right fit for their client or contract, and why the selection in the contract may be dependent on who they are representing and where the property is located?
Okay, so you guys probably know the basics of the deed stuff, so I'll try to make this quick. There's a few different kinds of deeds recognized by Colorado law. You got your general warranty deed, special warranty deed, quitclaim deed, bargain and sale. Those are the most common. There's also like some trustees deeds, in special circumstances. So let's just put those to the side. The main deeds you're going to deal with are those 4. Very quickly, general warranty deed carries full warranties of title, meaning that the grantor, the person issuing the deed, that's signing the deed, the seller, is saying that they warrant that the buyer is getting good title to the property from the inception of that piece of property. Okay, now it is subject to either specific exceptions from the title commitment or statutory exceptions, which we'll talk about in a second. But that is going to be your strongest form of deed if you're a buyer. And the reason is because those warranties of title run all the way back to when the property was first created. Special warranty deed, same exact thing, except the warranties of title run back to when the grantor acquired the property. Okay, so they're not making representations or warranties for a period prior to their ownership of the property. Now, for our purposes, it's a big deal. Deeds are a big deal, but the title company insures both of those in the same way. So it's not. It doesn't really affect title insurance. It's more between the buyer and the seller. And because of some changes to Colorado, the Colorado form and the addition of statutory exceptions, that's made that issue a little bit less of a big deal. And we can talk more specifically about that.
About the statutory exceptions.
Yeah,
and,
why don't you
like,
talk
if
about
you had a title claim? So previous to this concept of when a seller grantor conveys the property and says subject to statutory exceptions, you would oftentimes see the specific exceptions to title listed on the deed. So if something came up post-closing that wasn't on that list, you would have not only a title insurance claim, but you would have a claim against who's the person that sold it to you.
And that list is generated by the
Yeah,
title
by the title
company
commitment.
from their title plans, all of which are a little bit different. So it's not just like it happens magically and every document that affects the property suddenly appears on this list. It takes someone figuring that out and putting that list together, looking through the records.
Right. And so when that occurred, you would be more likely to have a claim directly against the seller, not only a title claim, for if that list wasn't accurate or correct. I think policy-wise, which Bob and Priscilla might be able to speak to, what has now kind of where we've transitioned to is this concept that deeds usually say subject to statutory exceptions. And those exceptions are the real estate taxes for the year of closing, survey matters, and then all matters of record. And so as between the seller and the buyer, if the title commitment isn't right, that really becomes then a title insurance issue. And that's probably properly where it lies because sellers aren't really, I mean, I know very few sellers that when they get a title commitment that they're familiar with those documents.
Well, and you probably have seen and wondered about the language that some people stick in a contract that says that they're removing the indemnity that's in the closing instructions. I don't know if that rings a bell with anyone, but this is why. Because what the title company is saying in their closing instructions is if you draft the deed and you include a specific list of exceptions, then we're not liable. And for a while, I'd say now I'm kind of very much comfortable with the statutory exceptions, and I kind of like that. I just think it makes everything easier. Mm-hmm. But for a while during that transition, we were trying to still include, in many cases, and sometimes we still do, but it's more rare, specific lists of exceptions. And that's when that language about striking the indemnity in the closing provisions, in the closing instructions really came about. You'll see that less and less because I think now attorneys and title companies and everyone's used to statutory exceptions and is kind of just going with it now.
Right, and you would never accept a title commitment that was subject to statutory exceptions because that would mean that you weren't doing the work to research and see what was actually affected this property. But it's as a policy matter between buyers and sellers, most people aren't interested in trying to go back and, litigate with the seller about something that they really didn't know about. And by the way, if they did know about it and it wasn't disclosed and it was an unrecorded matter, that's still fraud. And so you can't get away from that. But to kind of circle back to the original question about special warranty versus general warranty, I think more and more you really are seeing special warranty and that you're not losing as much as potentially you used to by really wanting to fight and get that general warranty deed.
Because it's less likely you're going to go after the seller anyway. Your recourse is going to be primarily with the title company, and that's no different whether you have the special warranty or general. And then real quick, just to wrap up this thing on the deeds, bargain and sale and quit claim. So those are deeds that carry no warranties of title. Okay, so that means someone is giving you this deed for a piece of property or a water right and saying, we make no representations and warranties. We'll give you whatever we have, now you have, but we don't make any representations or warranties. The difference between the two is a bargain and sale deed has what we call after acquired title, meaning if the grantor somehow acquires title after the deed, then that goes with the deed. A quitclaim deed is truly sort of the lowest form of a deed. It's just whatever I've got at this moment in time, that's what you get. And so, you don't, if you're representing a buyer, you really don't want that buyer taking a quitclaim deed or even a bargain and sale deed. But that's why we use it for water rights. And you'll see that in the contract. I'm sure you all have filled in that blank in section 2.7. And when you're representing a buyer, yeah, I mean, you want a general warranty deed if you can get it. If you're representing a seller, you're probably going to recommend a special warranty deed for the reasons that we've just described. But again, those reasons are becoming less important now that we've moved to this statutory exception framework.
Yeah, and that's why we saw the change of the contract where special warranty deed was actually added to the new contract as the default. If nobody checks any of the deeds, it automatically goes to special warranty as the default. You know, traditionally, snowmass was transferred by the developer by special warranty deeds. So that's why we see a lot of special warranty deeds in snowmass, but a lot of general warranty deeds, you know, in Aspen, for the most part. But, yeah,
And I also think you just also need to think about who the grantor is under those deeds, because if, let's say it's an LLC, you know, and you're fighting for a general warranty deed, you got to think about the collectability issue and what's behind that deed, right? If it's an individual, that's one thing. If it's an entity, that's another. So that plays into this discussion as well.
Cocktail party question. It's a quit claim deed, not a quick.
Yeah, I still bill the
Claim
same
deed.
amount as I would drafting a general warranty deed.
It's quit. So, in a, you know, my little spiel in a class I teach is in a land of unicorn and rainbows. Got to be in unicorn and rainbows. You know, what does your seller want to give to a buyer? A quit claim deed. And what does your buyer want? They want a general warranty deed. Now, if you find yourself in a position where your seller is entrenched on special and your buyer wants a general, you pick up the phone and call one of these guys and have them help you, negotiate through that. The other thing that happened with the statutory exceptions, the three of them, is that in that same legislation, it actually provides that title companies for the first time in Colorado can actually draft a deed. But we can only draft a statutory exception deed, and it needs to be a general or a special. If we're outside of that box on any other kind of a deed, or if you're asking to get B2 exceptions recorded, that's not our deed.
That's why that language is in the closing instructions.
There's certain things that title companies won't cover, right? No matter what.
Water rights.
Ditches.
We do not insure mineral interests, and we do not insure water rights in Colorado.
What about ditches, easement, like utility easement?
You might be able to get a affirmative coverage on an easement. Yep.
Like I always ask for affirmative access
Right.
endorsement for,
Well,
access. And I also want it insured.
If you're developing in the town of Carbondale, then you're going to have to get, you're going to have to issue general warranty deeds that have full title insurance for your public easements. So Mark Hamilton's not here. If he was, he would be chiming in. He's the town attorney for Carbondale.
When was the first deed ever issued in Colorado?
Homestead, I see homestead deeds from, the late 1800s, mid 1800s.
Most of them are going to see a patent date. So usually that's when the land ownership was established from the sovereign to private ownership.
So like the president of the United States?
Yeah, it's going to be the U.S. government, and then in areas like Aspen, areas like Leadville, you got to really look at those patents, because sometimes mineral interests may have been reserved, by the government. So if you're involved in a property where mineral interests is an issue, ranch land around here up towards Craig, big time issues. Get a landman involved on that. Run a chain of the mineral interests, the subsurface interest rights. Same thing with water. If water's a big deal on a transaction, you want to get a good water lawyer involved, because water rights in Colorado are adjudicated. But title insurance in Colorado does not insure the mineral interest below the ground and does not insure water.
This is a mining district, minerals are owned.
So oftentimes they're severed. So what that means for folk, there are people who own what's below the surface, different than who owns what's on top of it. Title insurance is providing insurance that you own what's here. You own that property, you own that land, but if there's a concern about mining or things like that, or who owns the, the interest below, that's a whole separate abstract that you'd have to get done.
Before they get into the minerals. They built 5 stories underground here.
Well, they don't have
Well-
surface rights, though.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for most of you in this room where you may not realize that it's there, the most common one that I see is in Snowmass, the original Snowmass American Corporation, on like every deed for, lots in Wood Run, lots on all those subdivisions. The conveyance deed from the original developer to the first owner says that they have reserved the mineral interest, but without the right to enter upon the surface. So practically speaking, I actually don't think title companies will give an endorsement for that one because it's pretty recent, but it doesn't give them the right to come on and destroy the improvements. So, I'm not an engineer.
They can go from another piece of land that they own.
Well, theoretically, but then the second kind of part of that discussion, which if you see, for example, on like a ranch property where there are mineral reservations by a private party, you can, talk about the cost of endorsement for insurance, and kind of the most diligence you can do is you do a feasibility report, and where you talk about, okay, are there minerals here? And if there are, how hard would it be to extract them? And that is going to involve, can you get permits to do it these days? So practically speaking, we're probably not going back to the silver mining days here. But
I would say that the mineral rights is a completely other discussion that we could spend all night on, and I think it's probably worth it for this room to continue on.
Sounds good. Thank you. That's, let's see. Let's make this one an easy one. Why can we not use Docusign for closings? And do you see our clients being able to use Docusigns for closings in the future?
We get this question all the time. So sellers have to be in front of a notary for the deed, the bill of sale, statement of authority, a couple of our affidavits. There is a new platform that's come out now. It's called notary.com and notarycam.com, which I just got to use notarycam.com for the first time this week for a foreign person that doesn't have a social security number. They were able to go and do it mobile on, just like you would do it like a WebEx. It was slick, it was easy. I couldn't believe how easy it was. It was so nice. And notary.com is for people in the states that have a social security number. They send them information to find out, to verify their information, and then they can also do that by e-signing. And then we get the documents, it's documented that they've e-signed in front of a notary, and we can record and disperse off of that.
Now, we're talking about on the seller side, because they're signing the all-important deed and other documents. Now, on the buy side, it's more likely that you're going to be able to get the buyer to sign electronically, or be the title company to accept that. But again, remember, there are a couple buyer side documents that require a notary. And so that's where that conversation will be with the title company. But I see more and more the title companies being flexible, more so on the buyer side. And with new technology that's coming out also, I think that's kind of going to be the way it goes.
Keep in mind, if you have a buyer that has a lender, the
Okay,
lenders are not on board with this.
There we go. That's
They are
right.
not
This is
on
where
board
I
with
jump
this.
in.
So it makes it really difficult.
We don't have lenders here, and,
Yeah, so
we're all cash buyers.
You're in a unique market, over in Winter Park, let's just say, for example, it's probably 75-80% of the deals all have loans, right? Different markets, so know the market. What Priscilla's referring to is remote online notarization. It's called RON. The technology is there, and as she mentioned, the biggest impediment right now to the use of RON is lenders are not allowing the use of RON. Lenders are just starting now to move to electronic notes, e-notes, e-vaults, and until they get to kind of a point where they're comfortable with having an electronic promissory note, we're still going to be told we're probably not going to be able to use Ron, even though it's available. In the interim, we're going to be introducing some new technology this year. It's called iPen, and it's probably a step in that direction, where you've got a complete electronic document set that you're using a biometric pen to go ahead and sign. And by law, by UETHA, it's equivalent to a wet signature. So there is going to be some more movement in the digital area, but some of the bigger impediments are some of the RON providers cannot do foreign nationals because they can't do the identity validation with that. So depending on the need, some of those platforms work or not. At some point, I hope in our mountain communities that our closers will be able to use RON and drive the bus themselves. I've always seen that being kind of the long term. But it's really going to be the issue of lenders and the promissory notes and where this all evolves for the next couple of years with fully utilizing RON. But this iPen technology is pretty cool, and I think that'll be kind of maybe a segue if we ever get to the holy grail of RON being used universally.
Thank you, you guys. Let's talk closing instructions. The Colorado Real Estate Commission requires brokers to complete a set between the buyer, seller, and the title company, in addition to the title company requesting to complete their own set of closing instructions. What are the difference between the two?
There isn't any difference. We can use yours. It's automatic that we print them out, and, sometimes we don't have both signatures, so it's just easier to get them to sign them when we have them live and captive, so to speak, because we don't always get them up front.
And yours come at the end.
Correct.
With the closing package.
Yes.
Ours should be gotten right away, obviously.
When the earnest
With
money
some-
is,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Please. Because again, it's a commitment between the buyer, the seller, and the title company to work together.
correct.
Right.
And when I get an opportunity to see them, which I always do at closing, there's tweaks that I like to make because I think the form instructions make it a little unclear on what happens if there's a default at closing. And I think they've tried, some title companies have added a sentence that it doesn't mean that you're going to return the earnest money to the buyer, or release it.
Right.
But I sometimes add in a little clarification that if there's a failure to close for some reason, the earnest money stays put until both parties give mutual instructions.
We have no bias. We're happy to use the standard form, and I think we have for
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
At least I've heard other companies do modify closing instructions. So the thing with closing instructions is we're not a party to the contract, and we're part of the division of insurance. We're not part of the division of real estate. And the division of insurance came out several years back and reminded us that even though we're named as the escrow holder in 22, 23? I think that's right, 23, 24. On earnest money, we really aren't bound by that language. And so it's the closing instructions that really deal with dispute resolution mechanisms for earnest money. So that's why we'd like to see them sooner than later. There was a time there where the Division of Insurance said you cannot accept earnest money unless you have signed closing instructions, which became a real nightmare.
Right, and it's a good point. And for you guys on the contracts, you may understand this or may not, but there's a section at the beginning that has a blank for earnest money holder, and then there's a section in Section 8 that talks about the seller being able to, or the buyer, depending on which box you check, choose the title company. So those could theoretically be two different things. In our experience, that's would be ridiculous and complicated, but I'm sure it does happen. So what that really means practically for you guys is that if you're filling out an offer for a buyer and you want a certain title company, you could put that in as the earnest money holder, and that likely, in many cases, not always, will lead to that title company being the title agent as well as the earnest money holder. So just a distinction there. And but also those boxes in 8 that say whether seller's buying or buyer's buying and who pays for it are also really important, because you could put your title company of choice in Section 4, I think it is, for earnest money holder, and then the seller says, nah, I want to use my title company. And then, it's kind of weird.
It needs to be counted up front.
Yeah, so I just look at the closing instructions as being our direction for earnest money dispute resolution. So having those sooner than later is very helpful if in fact we do run into an earnest money issue.
All too often, I think a lot of you out there realize this. A lot of brokers will wait till the very last minute, and their office manager will say, "We need these documents. These documents are still missing for you to get paid." And that's when the closing instructions get done. That's not right. Get them done up front. So, all right. We still got about 12 minutes left. I do want to ask a couple more questions, and we'll open it up to the floor for any questions out there. Let's talk crypto. Looking towards the future, do you think cryptocurrency will be a viable way to purchase property? And if not, what do you see as the most important innovations to come into the title industry? Anybody?
I don't see crypto ever.
I can get on crypto. There have been a few transactions around the country where title companies have taken crypto. I think the biggest concern is the conversion of crypto to good funds. Good funds mean, cash. That's why you ask for wires or a cashier's check in Colorado for good funds. So I think the concern is the liability of acting as a money exchanger. And having the expertise as being a money exchanger. I think that's what the barrier has been with crypto. There are some third-party companies that are now starting to say that they can handle that on behalf of a transaction. So I would expect that there's probably going to be some more movement in that direction as people get comfortable with it.
And we've already seen a sale with crypto.
Right? Yeah, there have been a few. I don't understand crypto. I don't understand the metaverse and selling real estate there. So, but but that's all part of the new horizon. But I think as far as what's really coming with title insurance, I think it's going to be the movement more towards fully electronic platforms, interfaces with lenders that they're comfortable with promissory notes. Be able to do e-notarization through those platforms. With signers being interstate or international, I think that's kind of what's coming up on the horizon.
Do you have any insight on like smart contracts, NFT smart contracts, as far as title transfer?
Well, as far as like blockchain technology in kind of coming into the industry, there has been a little bit of experimentation with blockchain as it relates to chains of title, and I think that's kind of where some of the focus is going to be. I still think there is an art, to examining title. There may be an evolution kind of on standard plat, block, lot stuff, subdivided stuff where blockchain technology maybe starts to become a component of title plants, but I still think the art of taking a look at a property from today backwards and scrubbing through it, I don't think blockchain technology replaces that, as far as I understand it.
So you guys are here to make us all better brokers. You guys are the wise ones in your profession. Are there common pitfalls that you see realtors making, or that we should be out on the look for, or what mistakes do you see realtors make that that maybe that can be avoided?
I mean, number one, I don't think we're the wise ones. I think it's so collaborative, and I enjoy working on deals with the brokers. The things that make my life easier when I get a contract are, I think there's this, what I think is a misconception that if we come up with a dates and deadlines scheme where it's like 7 days for this and 12 days for this, and it's like, to me, it's easier for them to all be one deadline. Although I understand that for certain things, it can't always be like that. So I would say that title and survey always should be the same date. And I can give an explanation for that, but like if I get a contract and I have a 10-day deadline to review title on a meets and bounds property in Castle Creek, I can do nothing with that title work for the most part unless I see the survey, because it's easements and it's like it's stuff that I have to look and see, okay, where is this on the property? So I would just say if you can, you know, and try to just like streamline the dates and deadlines as much as possible. You know, title and survey aren't directly related to inspection. That's fine. But title, survey, water, even due diligence, you know.
And also along those lines, understand that, that yes, we can look at a title commitment in a day and probably, because we've looked at so many of them, have a sense of what's going on. But it's not that we need 2 weeks to sit there every day, all day, staring at the document and clicking the links. That's not, but over time, like anything else, you get a picture of the property from a legal perspective. So that's why when we say we need a couple weeks, it's not, yeah, we all can read that document quickly, but it's to kind of follow up on stuff, research stuff, and the more time, the more thorough we can be. And we can look at, you know, is there some weird thing that's buried in a covenant from 1967 that your client might want to know about because they can't have more than 2 dogs and they happen to travel with a gaggle of 15 dash hounds. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, and so that, I mean, that's just a stupid example, but that's what the stuff over time, when you have time to really get to see a property from the legal side and look at these documents. So give us enough time.
Yeah, and it avoids objections, which is to me just a letter writing campaign, because when I can get a commitment and I have time to digest it and I can email Priscilla and the title examiner and say, here are some changes I want to make, or I have questions, we have time to have that dialogue without making objections.
Yeah, and then my response to your question real quick is really important, and anyone who works with me knows this, you got to pick the right title company and the right surveyor. You just have to. And we're not going to go into details on that here. We're sitting with wonderful title agents here, so I'm not worried about that. But I'm not here to disparage anyone. But having a responsive title company that gets back to you, that has good title examiners, that understands issues that lawyers might bring up about easements or claims or whatever, it's a huge difference. And a lot of times brokers have worked with title companies over the years and they just say, well, they'll get this closed. Well, yeah, a title company is going to get something closed because that's how they get paid. But the question is, what does that title commitment, what does that title policy look like when it does close? And also, what did it take to get there? And how much extra effort did the lawyer have to put in? How many letters and objections did I have to write because I didn't get a title commitment revised within the time period I asked for? I mean, Mark and I just dealt with this. And I know people are trying, but if you don't get that commitment and you have an objection deadline, you got to write that letter anyway. There's, you know, at least a few hours of time and money that your client has to spend on something that the next day you get the title commitment and they've addressed your issues. So picking the right title company is huge, and surveyor is really, really important. Someone who's good. And if anyone has questions about what makes a surveyor better than the other, or title company, you know, I'm happy to discuss that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think I would say, read your title commitments. You may not understand them. Call me. Call somebody. I mean, we have so many times that what do you mean we need trust documents? What do you mean there's a lien on the property? Well, it's been in the title commitment since we sent it out. That really helps us if you've got questions about what needs to happen to get that lien removed, that's what we're there for. But we also need the cooperation of the seller to get those things accomplished. And the sooner we can work on that, the sooner we can get that done.
Yeah, that's a great point, because we go straight to the exceptions. I mean, I read the requirements, especially when I'm representing a seller, 100% when I'm representing a seller, but I sometimes go straight to the exceptions when I'm representing a buyer. And then it comes up 2 weeks later that the seller's entity, you know, that there's something screwed up in the chain of title, but it's been on the requirements the whole time. So most importantly, I think, read the requirements when you get a title commitment.
And how do you differentiate yourself as brokers? You guys, I understand you're not lawyers, or some of you may have gone to law school or whatever, but there's nothing that stops you from reading that commitment and understanding the requirements. And if you catch something I mean, it makes our life easier. It's another set of eyes on it. I mean, don't feel like you're just, okay, there's a lawyer. Let's just give everything, like, read it. Your client's going to be impressed with you, number one, but also it's interesting, and you might see something in those requirements. And after you read enough of them, you'll be able to go through it quickly, because if the requirements are like they look in, I don't know, 85% of the, okay, you'll be able to, okay, there needs a deed, transfer tax, a few other things, right?
Operating agreement.
But then you'll see the one and it'll be payoff of some crazy thing. And you're like, what? What is this? And if you bring that up, you're gonna go look really good. But it's also should be part of what you guys do, and it'll help. Like the brokers that I think are really good are the ones that actually pay attention to that and understand that stuff. And they're not just like shoveling it off. Oh, the lawyer will read that. Who cares?
And something else I would suggest is getting a TBD when you get a listing, so that the title commitment is already done, you've had time to review it, and when you do get a contract, we can pump that out quick, because typically we've got real quick closings anymore, it seems like. And if you've got that information already in front of you and you're working on, say there's an old deed of trust on there that's been it should have been released 10 years ago. Well, it's still reflecting on the chain of title. The seller's like, no, I own this free and clear. Well, that's not what the chain says. We don't have a release.
Happens all the time.
Yep.
Lenders are quick to take your money, but very slow to record
Well, and especially around 2008.
because that doesn't make them any money.
A lot of the banks went bye-bye. And so the notes were sold over and over again. Nobody knew where they even ended up. Yeah.
Another quick comment on the requirements, I'm glad you guys brought that up, was when it comes to entities, corporations, LLCs, we're not trying to hassle your clients asking for copies of some of these documents. What we're really trying to do is just make sure they are who they are and they have the authority to do what they're planning on doing. And we're ensuring this to make sure that that's the case. So, just prep your clients that are selling as a corporation, LLCs involved. We're going to want to see operating agreements. We're going to want to see trust agreements. We just want to understand who are these people and do they have the authority to do what they say they can do, or else I've got a claim that's going to be showing up.
What if
a
the
year from
operating
now.
agreement says that it's a husband and wife, but they got divorced or even not, and it says that both of them have to sign on something, and there's no separate resolution that just allows one of them to sign? The title company just needs to see that. So you need to take it all the way down. Like if a LLC is owned by another LLC, which we see all the time, who's signing for that second level LLC? The title company is going to need those documents. So it shouldn't be a late annoyance for your client to get right before closing. It should be something that you guys are like, look, if you're using an LLC, we need the corporate documents. All of them.
Thank you, you guys. Obviously, this is their porn. You see how excited they get when they're talking about title? You guys, it's right at 7 o'clock. I wanted to leave a little time for questions. Do you have any pending questions? Or if not, you know where these guys are. Avery, Priscilla, Ben, Bob. You guys have been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. I know personally I've worked with everybody up here and everybody's exceptional. So if you ever need a recommendation or anything like that, you just go to them. They are absolutely awesome, and I'm happy to give out their contact information. Also, Title Company of the Rockies has some information and whatnot out over here. And thank you so much, Sam, for doing our AV tonight. Everything went off without a hitch. And we really appreciate Title Company of the Rockies. Thank you so much for the booze and cheese, and we had a great time. So thank you. You guys have a great one. Thank you so much, everyone.